Welcome to the Fourth Step Podcast. On each episode, we interview recovering addicts and learn their story with addiction. Through exploring personal journeys, we get a glimpse of the depths addicts fall to and their path in recovery. We hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Fourth Step Podcast. My name is Kevin, and I am an addict. And with me today is a sit-in co-host, a guest host, J-Dub, also known as Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm an addict.
Hi, J-Dub.
Hi.
And today we have as a guest my dear friend and sponsee brother, Ray D.
I'm an addict. My name's Ray.
Hi, Ray. So Ray and I have been sponsee brothers for, I was Steve sponsee for 17 years. Yeah. So about the same. And today we're doing a little remembrance memorial for Steve. He passed away not too long ago from cancer. So just right off the bat, Ray, I just want to know, how did you meet or get to know Steve when you made that decision to ask him to sponsor you? You remember?
Yeah, I remember really vividly. I started going to Willow Glen. Doug H. had said, you should go to this meeting, Ray. It's a really good meeting. And they're having a Christmas dinner they do once a year. And I was, the house manager at the Sober Living House.
Oh, yeah.
So I brought all the guys to this Christmas dinner, and then I kind of seen Steve there. I can't remember if he shared that night or not, but I seen him there. And then I started to attend that meeting. And then when I started to attend that meeting, he would, get up and speak once every 2 to 3 weeks because he was pretty popular and people would call on him a lot.
Right, but he didn't hardly ever volunteer to share.
No, never. I don't know that I ever once maybe heard him
Volunteer.
maybe once or twice ever get up.
Yeah, me too.
Volunteer to share. And so, I don't know, I just started to kind of somewhat gravitate to him because everything he said was just right on time, and I was actually being sponsored by a gentleman, Tony, in AA at the time, and I was on step 10 or 11, and I wasn't feeling 100%, comfortable in AA. I was attending more NA meetings.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I just started to feel like, I don't want to say an imposter, but I just didn't feel comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous.
I get it. Did you go through the rehab that you were house manager at?
No, they just hired me to be their house manager.
Oh, okay.
Which there's a
And
funny
at that
story
time you
about
had
that
how
one
much?
I'll tell later.
How long were you clean at that time? What?
So that's part of the funny story.
Okay, let's hear it.
When I actually took that job, I was 1 day clean because I was lying about my clean date in Narcotics Anonymous. So the guy thought I had almost 2 years clean.
Yeah.
And he never knew until after I was done with that job. And then I made an amends and told him, hey, I apologize, but, when you hired me, I literally had 1 day clean. It was the day after the Aerosmith and Motley Crue concert, and I smoked weed the night before. And never told it. You know the story.
I do.
I never told anybody about it. So that was, on my amends list some years later. And Steve walked me through that. And the gentleman understood. And I did a great job.
Yeah.
I did a great job at that SLE.
Well, you weren't loaded that whole time.
No.
So it probably worked out good.
And I was a good example, and I used to go to a lot of meetings, and that's what those guys needed, to see somebody that went to a lot of meetings and did the deal and not just told them what to do and not do it, So with that being said, I started to see Steve more and more, and I want to say it was right before NCCNA, and I went up to him and I said, hey, this is what's going on. I've seen you. I like what you have to say. I'd actually hung out with him a couple times at coffee, and I think I'd went to a clean date celebration.
Huh.
And I think they actually invited me over to Vicky's. It was either Vicky's or Steve's 25-year at this point, and had me hang out
At their house?
Yeah, because I was new to the meeting, and they wanted me to start to feel
Yeah.
comfortable, and so they did that, and they made me feel comfortable. And at some point, I just said, "Hey, would you be willing to sponsor me?" And he said, "Well, I've got a lot going on right now. I'm the chair, of NCCNA." He was doing the programs, or no, he was one of
No.
the chairs. He wasn't programs that year because that was the year I did it with him. And so he basically told me, I can do it, but you need to wait like a couple months. And I'm all, okay, all right. And he said, where are you at on your steps with your other sponsor? And I said, like 11. He said, well, how about this? Why don't you finish doing something? How many times have you ever finished something in your life, Ray? And I said, high school, and I made Eagle Scout. And that was it. Nothing else I've ever completed.
Yeah, he was pretty matter of fact about
Yeah.
stuff.
So he said, why don't you complete the steps with your sponsor? Seems like that'll be right around the same time frame as I got some time freed up from NCCNA, and then we can go from there. And that kind of started our relationship. So that was, in March.
So
17
I,
years ago.
I didn't know that story, but literally that is the same story I have with him at the exact same time.
Yeah,
We started
exact
the same time.
pretty much.
because he said basically the same thing to me. I was on host, and I remember at the convention, he was working. I can't remember what he was doing, but he was across the lobby of the convention center at whatever table that was, and I could see him the whole convention go, I think that's the guy that's going to sponsor me. When you asked him, did you do the whole like drag your toe in the dirt kind of high school?
Yeah.
Will you go out
It
with me thing?
Exactly. It felt,
Right?
and then I
Yes.
felt like I was being told no, or just, timing's just not right. You know what I mean? And I was wasn't used to that. I was used to getting whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
When I asked somebody whether it was a girl to go out, or, you know what I mean? I usually felt like I got what I wanted. And he was probably one of the first people after getting clean that, made me work for something.
Yeah. There's that part of your story I can relate to, where Steve would talk to you. At that time, he's probably saying the exact same things to me, that I felt like, oh, maybe this isn't get, maybe he's going to say no.
Yeah.
I related to that. But I don't remember it being too long after the convention where he said, why don't we just hang out for a minute? And then he goes, you know what? Yeah, I'll sponsor you. But we'll do the work together. Did you do that with you?
Same.
Same
Almost
thing.
the same exact thing. And I think we wound up after the convention going to a meeting. I mean, I had already somewhat inserted myself into that group.
Yeah.
Vicky B, Steve B, Claude, Juan.
The Willow Glen home group
Yeah, I
members.
had inserted myself. So there was a couple parties or whatever that had happened, and I was there. Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was when they sat me down at that party, Vicky B, I felt very awkward. I felt uncomfortable because I was new and I was around a bunch of people celebrating 25 years. And, I do think this was like the 9 months after he had started sponsoring me. It was the next, year. But I remember the party was dying. And so I'm reading the room and I'm getting ready to leave. And Vicky says, Mijo, come here. She pulls me in the kitchen
Dude, that is totally her.
and she says,
Mijo.
because she knew that at this point now I'm being sponsored by Steve.
Yeah.
So I'm family. That's the way she looked at me, And she
Automatic.
Still to this day, treats me like a son. And calls me in there and she shows me this cake that didn't get put out. And she's like, I'm about to make some good coffee. and there's the good cake. That's not for everybody, mijo. You know, and at that moment, I kind of knew I had arrived, you know, and I was going to be okay.
Arrived, like, not in an egotistical
No.
way, more in like you're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I was going to be okay.
that's exactly how
That I had
felt.
found my people. I had made that transition. I wasn't going to AA meetings anymore. I wasn't working the AA steps. I had completed it. I felt some sense of accomplishment in that.
Yeah,
I had, you know, made the awkward switch of asking somebody in NA. I had felt somebody I felt comfortable with. He made me feel like, you know, safe. No matter where we were at, in a big room, in a small room, in his room at, you know, his house.
yeah, in the kitchen.
I mean, and the thing was, it wasn't just him. It was him. It was Vicky. It was Dustin. You know, it was Vicky B, Steve B.
Mm-hmm.
Those four really kind of molded my recovery.
Yeah, I there was a Unity Day in the Peninsula, and they came down for it. I think it was in Palo Alto, and Steve B and Vicky B, Steve M and Vicky, we were all sitting at dinner. It was just the five of us, and Steve B and Vicky B had just lost their son, and I had no idea that happened, you know, because they don't like, they weren't sharing about it. And I just said, so you guys got any kids? And then, you know, I think it was Vicky M that said, you know, they just lost their kid. And I felt like so shitty for bringing that up. But Vicky and Steve B both like, hey, it's okay. You know, you didn't know. It made me feel like it was just, you know, an accident. And so there were those types of people, like they didn't get upset, right? That I did anything wrong. They just treated you like a human.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. And in my step work, I had already been, you know, writing, and I think I had done the green and gold, the step working guide, maybe the first time with Steve. And I can't remember if it was the first time or the second time. I wanted to do it once at least, so that if anybody asked me, I felt like I had been through it as well.
Yeah.
And one of my reservations was, you know, if my children ever died before me, I was going to get loaded. I put it on paper. I had made the decision already. And that was a huge fear of mine when I was in prison,
Mine too.
was that I would have nightmares that my kids got in a car accident or whatever, and they were no longer with us, and I wasn't there. And when I watched Vicky go through that, you know, as gracefully as possible, her son was an iron worker, and he got hit by a beam. And
Yeah.
it was a job that I had actually worked on. So it was pretty close to home. And I had to kind of scratch that off my list. I mean,
Right.
Steve talked about that, you know, and she showed me that I never had an excuse to use, because I had already scratched off the one about my parents dying. At that point, I had seen enough people in Narcotics Anonymous
Go through that.
go through that I knew I could go through that too and stay clean. But I hadn't seen anybody lose their child, especially in a traumatic event, and then be able to walk through it and stay clean. And so she showed me that if that ever happened to me, and I've seen it multiple times since then, you know, but
Yeah.
I try to always at least send her a text or call her on that day, because it's in my Just for Today. And it's one of the things that she, I know, completely appreciates about me, right? That I can
Yeah.
remember.
Hey, if you have any questions at any time, just hop right in.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I actually do have a question because I hear both of you talking. I have a friend of mine that talks about spiritual giants in their life and how
Good
you
one.
don't. Yeah. And so I guess maybe what I'm hearing, and I mean, I'm actually really feeling very moved, is you guys have been really blessed with some spiritual giants in your
Yeah.
life. And when I hear these stories, it reminds me of early recovery and the people that did that for me as well. It's really heartwarming. I was just listening to a podcast about, Ryan talking about Kim, and losing
Yeah.
her son. Same scenario, like you watch somebody go through that, and it's gracefully or not, you stay clean through that kind of stuff. It really does show you there's never, ever a reason to go out and use.
That's so true. Yeah. And when you were talking, Ray, I was thinking like, because we've had conversations about this before about having grace in the eye of the storm. And Steve B and Vicky B both showed me what grace looked like in the eye of that storm, because it was like traumatic and heart-wrenching and a horrible thing, but they both carried themselves, even in pain, they carried themselves with grace.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they absolutely, taught you kind of that it's not going to be easy,
Yeah.
but you can do it,
Yeah.
You also see how the fellowship really shows up for you
Absolutely.
Right?
in no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
And, I've experienced that before as well, where it's like no questions asked, no expectations, just like, here we are, whether you like it or not,
Yeah, yeah.
And, often I've buffed that and been like, no, I'm good. And they're like, no, sorry. You
I think
don't get out that easy. Yeah.
I think the more rooted you are in
In the
the
fellowship.
fellowship, right? The bigger that can be, sometimes to where you even have to scale it back. Like when Steve passed, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you kind of got to go, whoa, everybody processes different, and I need my opportunity to process, So, but if you're not as rooted and got a big foundation, you could very easily, I see someone skewing
Going
off and all of a
going
sudden
awry.
they're in isolation, and before you know it, they're loaded.
Absolutely.
But when you have a big network like the Brugis or the Majettis or you or I, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we have rooted ourselves to where you can't get too far away without somebody saying, hey man, we love you. What can we do for you?
That was something about Steve and Vicky. It's confusing if somebody's listening. There's Steve and Vicky and their best friends, Steve and Vicky. So we're just going to use the Steve and Vicky M.
Yeah.
Steve M is Ray and I's sponsor that just passed. So Steve and Vicky both were, like you said, like brought you in and made you family. But I remember them, like especially at Willow Glen, because I didn't fit in at all when I first started going there. And then next thing you know, like people would see me with Steve and Vicky, and they go, "Oh, he must be checked out." I guess I don't want to say like it's cliquish, but like, oh, he must be okay if he's with Steve M. And that's the way I felt when I went down to started going over and over down to San Jose. It was like, oh, he's okay, because Steve was that guy. He was, you said spiritual giants. It was like, I who was I talking to you? But we were saying we don't put peoples on pedestals. And then after Steve passes, it was like, yep, it's okay now to put Steve on a pedestal. He was that guy.
Yeah, Jesus was up there in the what do you call it? In the church.
Yeah.
And I looked at Kevin and I said, Steve's right up there with him. And he was, at least in my eyes, and I know you don't pack a church that can sit 700 and have standing room only if he's not that way in a lot of people's eyes, right?
Yeah, he was a spiritual powerhouse, that's for sure.
I mean, there's a reason, even though I know he didn't like when we called him the Godfather.
Dude, he hated it.
Or,
oh my God, dude. There's some stories about Ray. I'm like, Ray, what are you doing? We were having a barbecue in Steve's backyard. Somebody's birthday. Might have been his or Vicky's. And it was Steve's, I remember, because there's like 35, 40 people in the backyard, and Steve's sitting in a chair, and people are talking about him. And Ray just walks up, kneels down, while kneels down in front of him and grabs Steve's hand and kisses his ring. And Steve was mad. He was like, Ray, stop it.
Well, and I think something about spiritual giants too is like it's not on a pedestal. They're just people that deeply affect us and make genuinely. Like I think you guys knew that he was fallible and human and all of that stuff that we go through, and I think that. But I think there are powerhouses. It's the right word in our lives where maybe they don't affect others that way, but they affect us that way. Like
Yeah.
I have a group of people. It's the same setup. It's like although I want to do the Godfather thing with somebody too. That's great now.
Kiss the ring.
Well, like I can remember when I first started being sponsored by Steve, and I very quickly got into service at Willow Glen. I think the first service commitment I did, and at this point, mind you, I haven't really fully told the story about my clean date, but I'm telling him I got 2 years clean, maybe even 3 at this point, and I get voted in to be the assistant treasurer, which Debbie O was the treasurer at the time. And so they asked me, hey, can you, A, attend the meeting on Tuesday nights, B, come to the business meeting once a month, and then C, show up at Debbie O's house to do the books once a week, and I think it was on Sunday nights at 6 p.m. And I had no reason to say no, so I did. And once again, now I have these 2 women, because Elena and Debbie lived together at the time.
They were road dogs.
And these 2 women, molded me. That service commitment was much more than just learning how to do a spreadsheet and learning how, counting money for Willow Glen. They were teaching me how to transition from being a boy to a man. I was getting ready to be in a relationship. I wanted to be in a relationship. I didn't know how to be in a relationship.
What a great pair of women to get schooled by.
Powerful,
Yeah.
Hey, we want you to write a list. Next week, bring us back a list. And I'm at a service commitment. Now you're telling me to do step work. I have a sponsor.
By
It's
two women in the program,
that are all close with Vicky, M.
I bet you
tight.
did it though.
I did. I brought it back, and they said, we want you to write a list of what you want, in your ideal woman, right? And I brought this list back, and they read it, and they kind of giggled. Some of them weren't, oh, that's very good, and that's I don't know. I think you're going for a little bit of a reach on these 2 or 3. And then they had me go back and write my own list of okay, well, now what can you bring to the table, right? And they wanted me to cross-reference that list, and so they made me start kind of scratching some stuff out, because they're like, well, you can't even bring that to the table.
Nice.
You
That's
want a woman
smart.
that owns a house, but you don't own a house. You know what I mean? Not
You were
to
looking
say,
for a sugar mama?
of course.
Did you get one?
I got one now. Let's say that. And she ain't no sugar mama. She's just my mama, my good girl.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love her. Michelle. Your journey after you started working with Steve, where did that first round of steps, what did that look like? How did you guys do it?
Yeah, looking back on it, I know now, I was trying to kind of think about it, because the green and gold, and then the step working guide. I think we did it the second time through the step working guide, because I had a sponsee that wanted to do the step working guide, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it with him.
Yeah.
It was Travis. I didn't feel comfortable doing it with Travis without doing it myself.
I can imagine when you asked Steve to work the steps through the step working guide with you, that he was not happy.
He was resistant. And he had already done it with Eddie.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of him listening to my questions. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of them, Anyway,
There's
so I
a
think
lot
that
of them.
first time we just kind of did writing out of the basic text and the green and gold.
That was what we did too. Yeah.
And that was, and I like that, you know. I mean, I do it a little differently now. I mean, I think I just completed my 7th round or 8th round of steps with the men's group, Ron and Jimmy and Brian and
Yeah.
this other guy, Dan, from, I think,
Your area?
No, he's in Virginia. He
Oh.
Zooms with us every week. Virginia or
Oh,
DC.
yeah. I think
you know,
Jimmy told me
it's
about
bronze
it.
sponsor.
Yeah. That's right.
So, and each round is different and, you know, reveals different stuff, right? So,
Of course.
I think that with Steve, the most important thing was he always made time to listen. Never really told me exactly what to do or how to do it. He just gave me little nuggets
Dude,
of advice.
I remember you and I and Steve were hanging out. This was like the early part of Steve sponsoring us. And this is what made me think Steve's the guy, or one of the reasons why, is that you were talking to him and you were running something by him that you wanted to do, right? And it wasn't like, you know, at that period in your recovery, it wasn't a smart idea.
Were we in Tahoe?
I don't remember, but I remember him
Phil's
looking at
story
you.
coming on.
Yeah, I remember looking at you, and he's like, "Huh? Are you sure you want to do that?"
Did you go fishing with us in Tahoe?
No.
Okay.
So maybe he's done it a few times with
Yeah.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
we
Sounds
got
like-
into a drop dead argument one time.
Oh no,
And I
this
had-
wasn't an argument. He was like, "Huh? You sure you want to do that?" And you go, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." And he goes, "Okay." And I go, "Huh? He's not telling him no. He's not telling him what to do. Ray's gonna fuck around and find out."
Yeah. And I usually did.
What was the Tahoe
Same.
story?
So the Tahoe story is, I can't remember. I feel like there was one more person with us. It could have just been me and Steve. I can't remember. I know it was me. We went up to his
The condo.
condo in North Shore. He was taking me on a fishing trip. And I had started going to the gym. You know, I was hanging out with Julie and she was working out and you know what I mean? So I was kind of getting into the fitness and I'm like, I don't know, maybe a month. I'd go with Greg. So, you know, and Chris K would be there.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I'm into the fitness, but I've only been into it for about a month and I'm only probably going, you know, 3 times a week, maybe 2-3 times a week. But the disease sees these guys that have been in there for, you know, 2 years, 3 years. And some of them are on the juice, you know, and some of them aren't. They're putting in the work. The bottom line is,
Steroids.
yeah, steroids. And so,
The juice.
yeah, they're on steroids. And so, in my infinite wisdom, I'm like, you know, fuck it, I'm going to get on some roids. I had done it back in the Navy, and I bulked up, probably put, you know, 100 pounds on my bench in a matter of 3-4 months. I mean, I know what it's about. I'm gonna do this, and it's not, you know, it's not a mind-altering, mood-altering substance.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a narcotic. You know, in my mind, I can do that and stay clean. And so I wait till we're on this fishing trip, and me and Steve are at Starbucks. We're getting a morning coffee, and I'm like, hey, Steve, you know, I got a question for you. How do you feel about me, you know, taking steroids? I want to run it by you before I do it. And he just kind of pauses
Yeah.
for a good, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute. Kind of looks out the window at the lake. And it gives me like a sigh, you know. And I'm
This
like,
guy.
I can picture it
Yeah.
right now.
And I'm like, fuck, I'm in for it. What's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, you want to use steroids? Go ahead. You got to change your clean date. And I'm not going to sponsor you anymore unless you change your clean date. And I'm like, that's fucking bullshit. I go, it's not fucking, you know, narcotics. And I'm getting elevated. My
Wow,
voice
Ray.
is getting loud. Now his voice starts to get loud. He had never gotten that way with me. And he's like, that's it, Ray. And then he takes another pause and he's like, all right, look at this. Before you start, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to 10 people in recover, in NA that you respect, that are in the gym doing their thing, and I want you to write one page, like a little, interview with each person and summarize it in one page and come back to me when you've got that assignment done. And if, we find together that it makes sense, then you can start doing steroids and not change your clean date. I said, okay. And we just kind of left it at that because we were starting to kind of get angry and our voices were getting elevated and we were yelling at each other in Starbucks. So I said, okay. I do the assignment.
dude, sorry.
No, you're good.
Steve has stories. Steve told us all stories about, like poor decisions. And that was one of them.
Yeah. And so I did the assignment. I think I made it to 5 people. I think I interviewed, I want to say Jimmy, Julie, Chris, Kay, Josh. I don't know if you remember Joshua, I'm a big guy.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Like I said, I got to about half the people, and only one person co-signed doing it. And what I realized in doing that assignment was, okay, yeah, A was how was I going to get, the steroids was probably going to be behind some, you know what I mean? It was going to be
illegally.
Yes, it was going to be a dope deal, more or less. And then B, I was trying to change the way I felt, right? Because I didn't feel like Joey over there who could bench press 305 pounds.
Exactly.
I needed to change the way I feel. And so I got it. And I brought the assignment back to him. And I didn't do it, And we came to that conclusion together because I accepted his help.
It's pretty wise on his part.
That's genius. I'm going to start using that with my sponsees.
Yeah, why not?
When they come with me with decisions that I have an opinion about versus experience,
True. Yeah. But he did that a lot.
I love that.
A lot. And I remember he would let us make, end up making the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and granted, I came back to him 10 years later with a similar,
Great idea.
No, just a similar circumstance. And it was a much different conversation.
Yeah.
Say, hey, go to your doctor, get tested. Let's do this the right way. If you need it, I understand. Makes sense to me, right? Granted, at this point, I'm 12, 13 years clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not a year or two clean. I'm not measuring myself up against somebody in the gym because whenever I'm, trying to match my, insides with somebody else's outsides, I'm always going to fall short.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, you having the experience the first time on the second round when you had a similar situation is just proof of what those people when I talk about spiritual giants, it's like those are the lessons that we learn from the people in our life that either have the patience and the love and the tolerance because I got a lot of bullshit behavior that my sponsor, I'm pretty sure she's rolling her eyes on the phone on a regular basis still, like, oh God, not this again. But the way that she approaches it is never telling me what to do, right? And those are the people in our lives.
Best teachers.
Are the best teachers. Well, and then I get to also now with my women that I work with, share it, right? So it's like it's kind of cool how that happens. But that instant gratification piece, at least that's what I heard from your story, was like gets us every time, right? Even with time.
Yeah. What? So you were trying to figure out something else at a later date that you ran by Steve?
It's the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
The difference is, when you get older, it's TRT, right? It's testosterone. My testosterone level's low.
Oh, yeah.
I'm feeling draggy. I'm feeling fatigued.
Right.
And he said, well, go to the doctor, get checked out.
Did you?
Yeah. And I was low.
Yeah.
and they prescribed me testosterone, for a
That's
certain period
interesting.
of time to get my levels back up where they
Yeah.
need to be.
Do you still take it?
Not at the moment.
Yeah. That's funny you mention it because I know steroids affected a couple of guys that I know, and today they have to take testosterone because the steroids messed them up.
Which is weird because, testosterone is a steroid, right?
Yeah. So
But-
they have to put it back in the body, but at a different.
But it's, there's all kinds of other things, Trembolone or Decadebol. There's all
I have
these
no
5,
idea.
6, 7, 8 different things that you could take, and that they all just fall into this steroids. You know what I mean?
So it's a blanket
Soup,
statement.
right? But when now today they've realized that there's a lot of men and women, or more say men. Obviously, women have the estrogen. It's more the men. There's some women that got testosterone in today's day and age, but that's a whole nother conversation. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
That's all-
just, if you're low, then they sometimes
Yeah.
prescribe you to get your levels back to high. It's no different than antidepressants or anything else.
Yeah. So at that point, you're not thinking it as changing the way you feel.
No.
And so I think that's what Steve caught on to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right?
absolutely. Long before I did.
Yeah.
And it's just because I was filled with ego, false pride, all those
good
character
ones.
defects that owned my life for probably the first 10 years of my,
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah, envy was one of them for me for a long time. I could be like you. Everything
Yeah.
I would be okay. But that's the comparison.
And I still struggle with that one every once in a while.
I do too.
Not nearly as much as I used to, I look at people and I sometimes, man, if my life was like theirs, it would just seems like it'd be so much easier,
Yeah.
And then I have to realize, like, God's got me exactly where He wants me.
Well, you don't know what's really going on the inside with the people that you think that you want to be like either. It's like
Yeah. No,
You don't know
they're
the full
kicking their
story.
dog at home. when
Everybody's
nobody's
got
looking.
struggles, you
Yeah.
know? And then, but then, I look at people like Jimmy, and I admire Jimmy because I know that
That's different.
he's
though.
well off, but he's learned how to give back, and so I watch that, and then sometimes I get caught up and I'm like, man, it seems so much easier, I wish I could be retired, but I'm like, but that's not my life. My life, it looks different.
So the 2-foot drop. If you stop thinking about you wanting to be like somebody else, and then we talk about in your heart, like, are you content?
Yeah.
Do you have a good life?
I have a good life,
Yeah. Take away some of the material stuff. Will you still have a good life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure. Well, in
Yeah.
comparison is a thief of joy, right? You can't be present
Thief of joy.
you cannot be present in the moment if you're busy. I can't if I'm busy comparing myself to everybody else.
My wife teaches me that probably more than
I've got one of those wives too.
where she's like,
She's my co-sponsor.
yeah, and so is mine. And when I finally could kind of somewhat accept that,
Yeah.
Vicky told me at the funeral, she said, you wouldn't be with your wife if it wasn't for me and Vicky, right? And I
That's
said,
probably
yeah.
so true,
It is.
but it's
Because she kept whittling away on me when I was scared. I was in fear.
Yeah.
I didn't ever want to be hurt again. I didn't want to become vulnerable. And I couldn't say, hey, I'm going to let you in. And they kept telling me, man, Steve used to tell me all the time when I would be out there doing my thing and running amok and having girls over, Steve knew everything, right?
yeah.
When me and Dre broke up and I didn't really want to be with anybody and I took a couple of years to heal, I still was, okay, I'll bring her over to my house, but I didn't want anybody to stay, was like,
Promiscuous.
yes, I was, and Steve, honestly, he was okay with it. I can tell you, here's a story. Hey, Ray, you keep bumping your head when you're running back to something that's hurting you every time, right?
Right.
I would rather see you go to a massage parlor because there's no pain involved in that. Or go get a prostitute. You know what I mean? Because the same amount of pain is not involved in you pulling off that scab every time you go back to her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, granted, I don't think he wanted me running the streets and you know, on Santa Clara Street and grabbing a prostitute.
I think it's the point he
But,
was making, right?
You know, and so it might have been a massage parlor, right? But, and I only did it maybe once or twice, and I realized, oh God, I get what he's saying. But
Yeah.
it was enough to get me far enough away from that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Dre. It wasn't her. It was me. It was the pain that I was in and that I would keep wanting to, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. How long did it take you to acknowledge that after you guys split?
We had to stop being physical.
Friends. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Physical. Not
Well-
friends. Physical.
This is after you broke up.
Yes.
You kept going back. And
When we stopped being physical, we had a little distance between us. I was able to co-parent my kids. I was always able to co-parent our daughters. I still do that to this day.
Yeah.
But while me and her were being physical, I had no ability to see anything else was possible.
Yeah.
And when I got probably a good 6 months in between that, then I started to slowly heal. And it was probably from the time we left
Yeah.
to being able to feel like I was somewhat available to another woman, probably 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
That's a good chunk of change right there.
That is.
And
So-
I met a girl in the gym that I was hitting on. She was a cop. And I was asking her out. I think I told you this story.
Yeah, I remember this.
She was hot as hell, dude. Finest girl in the gym. I'm hollering. I'm thinking I'm going to get her number. She's flirting with me too. And she says, you know what? You're cute. I do have a boyfriend. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm also going to be honest with you. I'm not happy in my relationship, but it doesn't give me the right to go, okay, I want to go out on a date with you. She goes, and I'm going to, and I told her a little bit of my story. And she said, you know, I'm going to give you some advice right now. And maybe you and I will run into each other in the gym a year or two from now, which I did actually.
Yeah.
Like it was like 2 years later.
No way.
And she said, the best thing you could do is take some time and heal
Good.
before you get into another relationship, any type of relationship, you know. And it was a normie who gave me that advice, you know.
They're
And
smart sometimes.
And I heard it. And 2 years later, I got to tell her thank you. Still hot as hell. And she goes, you know where I messed up? Is I got into another relationship like 3 months later.
She didn't take her own advice.
She didn't. And that's why
We
she
never
knew,
do.
she knew how to give it.
It's
You know.
good for you, Ray, but
It's
not
great
me.
for you.
She had finally got out of that relationship. But, you know, it took her what it takes.
Yeah, enough pain.
And I was able to share that with Steve and kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. So with Steve, when did we start sitting at the kitchen table?
when we started doing the group, you mean?
Yeah.
Kinda? I don't know.
Is it like it was like 5 years
I
after
would
we
say
started.
5 years into our
Sponsorship. So Ray and I and a couple other sponsees, Eddie was there. Sal was in the beginning.
I think that was it, yeah.
Huh?
I think that was it.
Yeah, could
Initially.
have been. And then we'd sit at Steve's kitchen table like every other Thursday or something.
Yeah, it was every 2 weeks.
And we would, if I remember right, like we would work steps, but not the 4-step. We would do that alone with Steve. But we would share together every other Thursday. And then we started reading the books together and then all the IPs together. And so it was years and years and years. That time for me sitting at the table with you guys That was like something in my recovery that I was not willing to compromise on. Right? It meant so much to me to be at that kitchen table.
Well, and I've learned from that table to my men's group now that it's got to be one of the biggest priorities in my life. You know, it just needs to be towards the top.
Yeah.
With, you know, God and my family. And I'll find reasons every once in a while. And, you know, there was probably a couple times where I'm like, I just can't make it tonight, you know. But I was always, so, I mean, just so you know, I mean, I was always kind of somewhat looked at, even though I'm 51 now, I was still always kind of looked at like the kid.
He was the youngster.
That was me.
They all had, I mean, and it was a little, I don't know, I'd say overwhelming, intimidating.
Yes.
Because, you know, these guys all had almost double the amount of time that I had, you know, and then when it probably took some years, and then I realized it was a gift, you know.
Really?
It was a gift, like, for me to be able to sit there with you guys and to just be able to soak in. I have always gravitated towards the old souls, you know, towards the OGs, towards the people that have been there and done that. And I might not always take the advice right off but I get it more than the next person that's not sitting there with those old people.
Yeah.
Or those old timers or those dinosaurs or whatever you want to call them. I was getting that at 2, 3, 4, 5 years clean.
It's a
with
pretty
people who
special
had
thing.
20 plus, you know.
That's amazing. Our stories are actually very similar because I have the lying about my clean time. I had to come clean at 2 years, and then I've always been the baby of the group, like from day one. And I even now I'm.
Well, you were
almost,
17 when you got clean.
I was 17 when I got clean, but I'm almost 50 now, right? And I'm still the baby of the group for the most part, which I don't mind today. It used to bother me, and I'd be like, I can't wait till I grow up. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to anymore. And I did the same thing with the step working guides. I asked my sponsor to do it with me because I was afraid that women wouldn't ask me to sponsor them had I not done it. And I was the resistant one, and we ended up doing it in a group with my sponsee sisters. And we did that for a while. We did a couple different books like that. And those were some of the real pivotal pieces of my recovery where, you know, I got vulnerable with a group of women regularly that made me more comfortable to do it today, even.
That's a good point. How did you got comfortable sitting at the kitchen table?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like you said, I probably had 5 years, 6 years clean at that time, or at least that's what I was saying. And I guess maybe at some point I probably need to tell the story.
Yes.
But I started to feel, you know, like I was one of you guys and welcome, and, you know, I wasn't, you know, oh, you're like, and that's the thing is Steve never made me feel like I was less
I was
than.
just going to say, you might have felt that way, but sitting at the table with you, I always felt that we, you and I and Eddie and Sal, we were just there catching wisdom from Steve, you know? But Steve never ever was like, hey, I'm the dude.
No.
We did that to him.
Yeah, the Godfather.
all the way
I never kissed his ring, though.
No.
all the way to the deathbed.
Yeah.
He never felt that way.
No, he never wanted
And I kissed his
the
ring
limelight.
again the last day I saw him. You know.
That was a different kind of kiss.
So here's a funny story about Eddie. It's not really funny. It's very inspirational. So the time I had come around, I want to say the time before, I was brand new, and actually, no, I think it was this time, but I was brand new. I was fresh out. I was at a SLE, but I was messing with some girl up in the peninsula. I can't remember her name. She was going to a little recovery party thing, and it was at Eddie's house. So she brings me down there, and I want to say I have 5-6 months clean at this point, You know, it's not a lot. It's very little time. And she, been messing around. So, but when we got there, I felt somewhat awkward, almost like, well, she knows all these people. And I did know Eddie from the Just for Today meeting because I had been to that meeting when I had got clean in 2000 and 97.
So you met him before.
So I had met him before, you know,
Yeah.
and I knew who he was. And so we go down there. It's like I think Chris was there, Eddie, there's maybe 3 or 4 other people. Forget if it was a football game. I think it was a 49er football game, I want to say. And they were barbecuing and stuff. And I see everything Eddie's got. And it's that comparing. He's got a Harley, he's got a Benzo, he's got a house, you know.
Yeah.
And he probably had, you know, coming up right around 20 years clean or something at the time.
Eddie.
Yeah. And I just start feeling very insignificant in this house. And I kind of sit on the couch and, you know, just kind of sit in my place and not very talkative. And then me and Eddie, I said, man, you have a really nice house and, you know, a lot of nice toys and everything. And he sat me down and he said, you know, let me tell you something. Because I was on GA at the time. I had a
General
general assistant.
assistance. Yeah.
I was living in an SLE over on the east side of San Jose. I'm like the only person in the house out of like 30 people actually doing recovery. Everybody's there just to try and get their case. And I had a little beat up car, Nissan Sentra, that my ex-wife's, father had basically helped me buy. He gave me $500 to buy it. So I was, I was riding the bus before that.
Yeah.
And he said, Ray, when I first got clean, I was on general assistance. So I heard that, right?
Oh, yeah.
He said, I didn't have any credit cards. I didn't have a house. I was in a sober living house, just like you. And it took me a long time, man, to get where I'm at. I learned how to pay bills. I learned how to, he said, the first credit card I ever got, I had to put, $500 down, and it was a secure credit card.
Right.
My credit was terrible. And so you need to understand that this is a process and just take baby steps, And if I look back to that conversation now, if someone was to sit on my couch, it's right around the same time frame as
Yeah, no kidding.
I own a house, you know what I mean? I have a couple cars, I got, things. But the biggest thing is that when I pull up to my house, I know it's filled with love. And so if I lost all of that,
Yeah.
love doesn't go away.
Right.
That's the wealth, right?
Yeah.
That's the wealth. Steve had this way of keeping things simple. Mm-hmm. And I remember, we would make things really, really complicated. And he just a simple answer would what do you think is the right thing to do? I didn't even think about right and wrong. I was thinking, this is what I want to do. And so that's because Eddie was the one, we were sitting at the kitchen table in the early years, and Eddie just says, what we don't hear anymore is the 2-foot drop. Mm-hmm. And, I looked at Steve, and Steve's like, yeah, true. And Eddie, I was like, I never heard that one. And he's like, from your head to your heart, and explain the whole thing. And so I really internalized that. And I think that was a turning point for me, because Steve had those simple suggestions or answers, to everything that I was going through. And I'm sure it was the same for you, that in my head, I had this idea of what I wanted to do or get or whatever. But that 2-foot drop, as soon as Steve said that common sense answer, I was like, oh yeah, that feels like the right thing, in my heart. You relate to that?
I've never met a man of so few words
Yeah.
that could make such an impact. I don't think just on my life, but definitely, I'll speak for me. He could say, where I would say 48 words, he could say it in 5 or 6, and it just kind of goes to show you, right? I'm a talker, Not to say that Steve isn't a talker, right? I can tell you that sitting at his table sometimes, just watching the way that him and Vicky interact, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, God, I'm so Steve at home. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so much almost the same way. And it's funny, right? It's funny. Like, and I think, is this what my life's going to look like when I get, 60, 65, 70?
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, I hope so. I hope so.
Steve?
The banter is.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I love that. So the very first time I saw Steve and Vicky like bicker, like I thought I was super uncomfortable. He's, and he would like snap at her,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Should I leave? And then Vicky's like snaps right back, like whatever the issue was, could have been about coffee or ice cream or something. And then they would laugh. Steve's laugh. Ha! Right?
Yeah.
That was just it. That was all he did was, ha!
That's so great.
And then she would come over and kiss him. And he was like, she's a hoot, isn't she? He'd look at us.
And you're thinking something's about
Right?
to go down right
And
here.
he's laughing the whole time.
That's
and it's like
funny.
so it changed from like uncomfortable bickering, and it made me feel like, oh, they're being authentic with me. Yeah.
Love that.
And so like they kept doing that the whole time. All the way up until he passed. It was
Yeah.
he was making cracks at her, days before he passed.
It really makes me appreciate my sponsor when you guys talk about this, because her and her husband, I'll be on the phone with her on her landline. My sponsor is 75.
Landline.
On her landline. And she'll be like, Ira, I'm on the phone. You can hear him yelling at her. I'm on the phone with a sponsee. He'll be like, who? Jennifer. Oh, and he's talking in the background. And
Yeah.
she's like ready to just like lose her shit. She's like, Ira.
Enough.
And it makes me laugh, because when I hear you guys talk about that, I feel like, oh yeah, like these are the people in our lives that matter, that are important, that shape the, how we are today.
Yeah, and they're not holding back.
And they're not holding back, right? That is what attracted me to my sponsor, was she knew who she was. And when she talked about it in a meeting, the first time I ever heard her chair a meeting was, I'm so glad you asked me to speak, because I love to hear myself talk. And I thought, that's it. And when I hear what attracted you guys to Steve, it's the same thing. It's an attraction of, I want to get to know that person more, because it something in my spirit, lights on fire when I hear them speak, or I watch them.
I mean, if you're lucky enough to hear him speak,
Yeah.
and that's I look back and I go, that's what I was attracted to, is like, because I had fought ego and false pride for the first 15 years of my recovery. And then I did some work with Iris James. Do you remember Iris James? And that was what the reoccurring theme was in my program, was ego and false pride. And it affected a lot of things. It was very negative. And so I started working on that. And then when it was time to find a new sponsor, here's this guy that, would just sit in his chair and somebody would have to call on him. And then he would get up and go, well, as quiet as it's kept, we don't have to make decisions right away, or whatever that wise little nugget was. And I'm like, oh shit, should I be writing this stuff down? Because he just had those simple answers.
Yeah.
Steve allowed you to, and this is one of his sayings, see things from a different vantage point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy uses that all the time, because, like you said, when Jimmy heard that, when he shared, I forget if it was at NCCNA, when he shared that, it just clicked, right? And that's what I've been looking for, I mean, Steve was like a second dad to me. Steve allowed me the grace and the dignity of understanding of how to be there for my dad when he passed. Steve knew my dad. Steve, has interacted with my dad. I don't know, like, do I feel guilty for saying this? But he played a much bigger impact in the last 15 years of my life than my dad did, right? My dad still come to my softball games. He would go to celebrations, events. I loved him till the day he died, But Steve taught me how to be his son, how to be there by his
Yep.
side, how to not need any words when that was happening, but to just be able to look in his eyes. When I went up there and my dad was passing, I thought he was going to pass, was 2.5 years ago. He was in the hospital up here in Placerville. He was on the ventilator at the time, and then they took him off, and he could barely talk. And he said a few words, and he said, we got to have our moment, and I got to say what I needed to say. Nobody else was really there and understood that moment like I did. My dad gave me I'm good. And then he held on for another 9 months for other people, not for himself.
Hey, do you believe that you wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for Steve?
Absolutely.
100%.
100%.
Hey, I was laughing earlier because when you said your dad, do you remember the first interaction that I had with your dad?
Was it moving? I forget.
No, you and I took a road trip up here.
Yeah. And we went to their
And
house.
we went to their house in Camino?
Pollock Pines.
Pollock Pines, yeah.
Yeah.
And we went fishing with
fishing.
them at Ice House, right?
Ice house, yeah.
And then we went back to the house. We're staying there. And so I had my shoes off, right? My shoes and socks were off. Do you remember that?
Your toenails were painted.
Yeah, I had purple toenails.
Oh, okay.
And his dad was not used to that at all. Probably never seen it
I
in
don't
his
think
life.
he'd ever seen it.
Yeah, and
What did he say?
and his mom was so cute, man. She was amazing.
She don't care.
She was awesome. But his dad goes, and this is after we had been fishing, and I had a stringer full of fish I gave to him, and he's in the sink cleaning the fish, and he goes, Kevin, I have to ask you, what's up with your toenails? So I started laughing. Like, it was a long story. Like, I was sponsoring a guy that was in a local clean and sober motorcycle club. And at the time, he was the president of the club. And we were doing step work, and he had his shoes off. And he had painted toenails. And I asked him I said, the same thing your dad said. What's up with that?
Up with the toenails.
And he goes, man, you ever had a pedicure? And I'm like, no. And he goes, you haven't lived until you had a pedicure, blah, blah, blah. And he said, put your money where your mouth is. This is my sponsee. It was Peaches.
Yeah, I know.
And so the next week, Peaches and I go to the spa, and we're sitting in the chairs getting our toenails done. And this is like the epitome of like life's ironic twists. He's sitting in the chair next to me, in his leathers with his colors, all his stuff, getting his toes done with me. Like, never in a million years would I ever think I would be here right now. And it's only there because I was willing to try something new.
Yeah.
But your dad, I gave his dad that whole story.
And what did his dad say?
He goes, huh.
Interesting story.
His mom was like just asking questions and all kind of stuff, but his dad was like, huh. Kind of like Steve.
And at the end of the day, my dad wouldn't judge you for that, or
He didn't
care or say you can't bring the guy with the toenails back to our house.
No.
He just didn't understand it, right?
Yeah.
That's funny, though. That's a great story.
First time I ever had a pedicure.
Yeah.
I asked Peaches, what color have you never had on your toes? Because he's been doing it for years, and he
Yeah.
said purple. So, all right, I'll get purple.
I bet you get pedicures all the time now.
I do.
Oh, yeah.
Me
I get
too,
mad
though.
when Jen goes without me.
Yeah.
We were talking about this last weekend.
Yeah.
And you were all upset.
God damn it.
You went without me.
Yeah.
I pamper myself. Massages, pedicures,
Hell yeah.
all that. Why not?
Let all those stereotypes go out the window. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Steve, after the funeral, we went to the restaurant, and it was the first time I had met his family. And at the service, they mentioned the podcast that we did with him. Josh and I did with him. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before he passed. And we didn't. I felt that I just wanted to capture Steve before he passed. Right. I didn't know if it would make an impact or not, but I was basically doing it for me, selfish reasons. Right.
Yeah.
But at the restaurant, we were introduced to Steve's family, and all of Steve's family were, we're in tears. Thank you so much. It's amazing. You captured him in his last days. I was overwhelmed, and I started crying. And the whole table of his family, his daughters were there, and I just started crying. I said, Steve was the father I wish I had. I'm not saying anything bad about my dad. My dad had what he had. He was abused, and when he was a kid, he didn't know any better, didn't have any teachers.
For sure.
Right? Steve had NA. And NA taught him how to change his life, right? So
Absolutely.
he did that for you and I. It's like, if I am going to parent my children, I want to parent them the way Steve parented us.
There's so many parallels and what's crazy is just to think that that it's coming to fruition, right? Like when I look back of when I first was being sponsored by Steve and Vic, I say Steve and Vicky because honestly, for me, I've spent a lot of time over there and it's been, you were married already, right? Like you had your life, and I'm still trying to figure out how do I get to this place in my life where it's not so much about what I want, but what can I bring to the table? Can I complete some? Can I be vulnerable? Am I worthy enough to be loved? You know what I mean? I didn't have that self-worth, and those 4 people. Steve B, Vicky B, Vicky M, Steve M. They continued to just work on me for years, and especially after Steve B died, Vicky B and Vicky B and Vicky M, they just continued to build me up in a way that when I was ready to be vulnerable and to. Because it wasn't that, Michelle wasn't, say, ready for me. She was. But I didn't know how to be ready. And Steve would teach me through step work, and Vicky, and they would tell me that, Steve would always tell me, dude, you're a relationship guy. And I don't know if you remember this, but he also used to call me Shallow Hal.
Huh. Wow.
You're Shallow Hal, Ray.
That was a long time ago.
And I was Shallow Hal for a long time.
I just remember that. I completely forgot about that.
And that came up until... Even the last time I seen him, he goes, "You're not Shallow Hal no more."
For those youngsters listening, Shallow Hal was a movie. Jack Black?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a long time ago.
Great movie.
Yeah. But the character, explain what the character is about.
Well, there's a guy, and I think the woman is actually, 300-400 pounds or something like that, right? But when he sees her, he sees only am I saying it right? Yeah, like a supermodel. So that's how he sees women. If it's not a supermodel, if it doesn't meet this, criteria, then there's no reason to even have that conversation. Or if it is, it's going to be an in and out. I'm never going to allow you, to be in my life more than a night, right?
Yeah, that's how you related to it.
And that's how I related to things was, okay, we could go out and hang out, but that'll be just for tonight. And then when I see you in a meeting next time, it's going to be weird and awkward. And, and so that was kind of my life. I mean, Tina K, she ousted me at Vicky M's 30-year
Ouch.
clean date. I'm at a table, and I'm the only guy sitting there. And there's, I think, 6 women sitting at this table.
Was that the restaurant upstairs?
Yeah, Original Joe's.
Yeah, I was there.
And you were there. And I was sitting at the table. I won't say the names of the girls that were at the table. I'll just say that there was 6 women at the table.
Yeah.
And Tina walks up and says, "Hey, Ray, if you would have fucked me and Kathy, you would have had sex with everybody at the table." And my soon-to-be wife sitting at the table with me. And I'm like,
Hey, well, what are you going to say?
I'm speechless, dude. Well, there's nothing I can say.
No, there
Even
isn't.
my wife's like, she gets up or, goes to the bathroom. I'm just like, fucking Tina, are you kidding me? Like, was that necessary?
She felt it was necessary.
And you know what? It stung me enough to make me realize, granted, I hadn't cheated on my significant other at that time, and I haven't cheated since before that, but it's all the wreckage that I had created prior to that.
Yeah.
And that's what Steve was trying to get me to understand. I don't know if you remember that girl, Laura, from Florida, that shared, she had the miracle baby.
Lorita.
She had the miracle baby at 50 or whatever, and
Yeah.
the guy held her up at NCCNA.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the one thing she said in that meeting. Be careful who you sleep with in NA, because you just might have to recover with them.
Yeah.
And that was during that whole transition for me where I decided I didn't want to cheat on women anymore. And because when I came in here, I was a cheat, a liar, a thief.
Right.
It took me, 6, 7 years to stop being a cheat. It took me probably 10, 11, 12 to stop being a liar. You know what I mean? It took me 5 or 6, 7 to stop being a thief, And these are all like, I'm going to tell this story about my clean date because that kind of.
I was going to ask you about that next. I was like, I got to hear this story.
So, I have 7 years clean, I'm saying, right?
At the time.
At the time. I have 7 years
Not
clean.
now.
We just celebrated 7 years in January 7th, 2005 was my original clean date. That was my clean date that I had claimed. And so I had 7 years clean, so this must have been like, 2012 or 13, something like that, right? My math's not doing good right now. 2014.
We don't have to worry about math.
Yeah.
It's about 2014. And people had been celebrating these anniversaries with me every year. And I guess you would say, somewhat popular. I'm in with the Majettis. I'm in with these crowds. I can remember my 4-year clean date going to Sonoma Chicken Coop downtown San Jose. And I'm not kidding. There was probably 100 people there, And my mom had drove down from Cameron Park on a Tuesday night.
And you're living with this guilt?
Yes. And so at 4 years, I feel like it got a little bit worse. And at 5 years, it was starting to get to a point where, like, man, dude, like, you keep doing this every year. You're the only one that knows. You're going to take this to the grave, because Steve didn't know. Nobody knew.
Yeah, you were going to get loaded.
And so at the 7-year mark, I was supposed to share Willow Glen. It's like March of that year. And I was supposed to share for Denise on that Friday night. And it was like Thursday. It was Wednesday or Thursday. And I remember. And I'm driving down. I'm in Redwood City. And I was doing a job. And I just had made a decision. You know what? I'm going to go over here to this dude Bones' house. I know lives right over here. I know he's always got weed. I'm going to go over there and get high. And then I'm going to come back Friday to the meeting. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm Ray and I'm new. And everybody's going to, clap and give me a hug and love me up. Mind you, I'm the chair of entertainment. I'm the entertainment assistant chair for NCCNA at the time. I've got all these different commitments. I've got like 10, 12 sponsees. And now I'm going to go get loaded, and then everything will just be okay. And as I get ready to make this right turn, Tony calls me, Tony R.
Yeah.
He calls me and he said, "What are you doing right now?" And I'm like, he goes, something told me to call you. And I'm like, I go, well, I'm about to go get loaded. And I made a decision, I'm going to go get loaded. And here's why. I've been lying about my clean date for the last, 7 years. and I really had 5.5 is really
Yeah,
what it was.
last 5 years.
For the last 5 years. And he goes, well, man, that's heavy. You know, I would appreciate it if you didn't do that. I don't want to lose another friend. And I had already walked through some shit with Tony, you know what I mean? Where he was going in and out and was trying to
Right,
help
yeah.
him get clean and going and seeing him, you know, loaded. It was like hard, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to hear him tell me that was like, okay, you know, this guy cares about me. And he goes, what I want you to do is go down and see Steve and just tell him the truth, man. Just tell him what's going on. And please call me once you're done over there and just let me know you're safe. And let me know how that, you know, goes. I love you. And I'm crying now. I told him the whole story. You know, I've been stealing copper from work. I've been, you know, cheating.
All of it?
I told Tony pretty much everything I do. And he goes, you need to go tell Steve all this. And so I went down and Steve's like, look, get him on the phone. He goes, I got a half hour. I can fit you in. I got other stuff going on tonight, Ray, but I could tell you're distraught. I didn't tell him exactly what was going on. I just said, I just need to see you. He said, all right. Because I didn't want to tell him over the phone.
Right.
So I go down and I sit down with him and I tell him I've been lying about my clean date, you know, for the past, obviously I say 7 years because that's how long I think I have at the time. And then I talked to him about I've been stealing 20-foot lengths of 4-inch copper from work and throwing, and I've been swinging all these illegal bats and co-ed recovery softball.
Oh, yeah.
And Steve
forgot
had already called me on that. You know,
Yeah.
Basically called me a cheat and a fraud and basically he had already basically called me a fraud, and it stung.
He told you the truth,
But
though.
it was the truth.
Yeah.
And people were starting to tell me the truth. Tony was like, and I hadn't heard a whole lot of people really tell me, man, I don't want to lose a friend. And at that point, I was really ready to get loaded. And I thought the idea was perfect. I would never have to tell the story, right? Because it would be gone.
Right, you just be a newcomer again.
I would have 2-3 days clean. I would be new. Everybody would love me because they love me.
Ray.
And then it would be gone, and I would never have to share it, because we would move forward.
Right.
And Tony, that was a spiritual giant for me. That was God's grace showing up for me in my life. And I sat down across from Steve, and he didn't judge me. And the simple, like you said, the simple things he would say.
Yeah, I can imagine he'd go, okay, so you change your clean date.
He said,
And then you go to the meeting and you tell everybody that you change your clean date.
he said, you know what? The good thing is here, Ray, you got 5.5 years clean.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I'm crying and sobbing and and I go, what about my sponsees? I've been lying to them. And he goes, if they leave, they leave. If they judge you like that, so be it, And he said, but I got some conditions for you. A, you're going to go on Friday. You're going to share that meeting. And you're going to tell the truth in front of your home group. B, you're going to finish your NCCNA commitment because it's coming up in a couple weeks here. You're going to go do your commitment with honor and integrity. And at the kickoff meeting with the committee, you're going to tell the truth that you qualified for that commitment because I was getting ready to take entertainment chair on from assistant to entertainment.
Right.
They're going to vote me in. And you're going to tell the truth and you're going to give up that commitment because you qualified on a false clean date. Not that
Gotcha.
you're not qualified. It's because you qualified on a false clean date.
Yeah.
And you're not going to speak in meetings for 30 days after Friday when you share the meeting. And I said, hey, I'm good with the sharing on Friday, and I'm good not speaking in meetings after that, but I'm not giving up my clean date. I mean, my
Commitment for NCCNA.
For NCCNA.
And so the motive to keep it?
Ego, bud.
All right.
Ego.
100% ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I keep it? No. But it was hard to take that advice. And he knew what was best for me when I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't need that at that point. I didn't need that pressure. And what's crazy is when I told that to the committee, there was another committee member that said, man, I did the same exact thing you did. And I have had at least 20 people when I tell that story come up to me and say, man, thank you. you know what? I've been lying about my clean date for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you do what you want.
We hear it all the time.
I lied about my clean date for 2 years. And I got up and got a 2-year chip, and I had my sponsor and one of my best friends, Ruth. We shared a clean month. We shared August, and I had relapsed in November, and I never told anybody, and it was bleeding out in every area of my life. Because that's what I heard from you, is that you can't compartmentalize this one piece, right? Eventually it comes out in other ways. And I stood up in front of a meeting, gave my chip back, and I was mortified at what people were going to think, and it was nothing but love, which I think is your experience, right? I mean, nothing but love, but the humbling experience of knowing and not being able to tell people, like, today still keeps me in the, like, I want to tell the truth all the time, because I don't want to go through that again. But every time I hear somebody else say it, I'm like, it still makes me feel like, oh, good, I'm not the only one.
Yeah,
even though
sounds
I know
like
I'm
that's
not.
true for you.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
I've
get
had
the same thing.
I've had so much growth around that whole scenario, right? I stopped using shaved bats. I didn't steal copper anymore, and that's what Steve told me. He goes, man, Ray, I am the clean date is the least concern of mine. He goes, I'm concerned about the things that could land you in jail with 5.5 years clean.
Right?
Yeah. Or you could brutally hurt somebody because you're using this bat in a co-ed recovery softball league where a girl's playing third base, and you might blow her face apart.
Right.
Because of your ego, right? So you can hit the ball 30 yards farther. So I can pound my chest and look at me,
You wanted to be like Fletch.
And I did.
I know.
But Fletch wanted to be like somebody else. And then that guy wanted to be like, we all wanted to be, and we've all grown so much, And so just revolving that clean date, it was the shift in my recovery. And when I shared that meeting, and I got up to share that meeting, I don't know if you remember if you were there or not, Kevin, but
I vaguely remember.
I feel like you were, because
Yeah.
I know Tony came down.
Yeah.
And I couldn't speak. I started to speak, and I just started to cry.
I was there.
For about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. And nobody said a word. They appreciated what I was going through. They understood. They allowed me to have my process. And then I was able to get it out and tell my truth. And for the most part, probably 95% of the people just showed me love, right? I had a couple sponsees that left me and judged me, and they needed to be somewhere else. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't understand all of that at that time, but that was the shift in my recovery when I think I shifted from, it was a lot easier to be honest than dishonest. And that was at, 5.5 years clean. Was I perfect? No. Have I told some lies? Sure. I can tell you what, it's hard for me to tell a lie today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Tony. So Tony had an issue with lying, and I was sponsoring him at that time, or maybe a little after. But we had this exercise, and Tony, when he would tell a lie,
about this.
yeah, when he would tell a lie after a long period of like keeping secrets, he practiced. If he was having a conversation with us and he had told a lie, we got him to snap his fingers and go, you know what? That's a lie. This is what happened. And you make it so nonchalant and not put energy into it that it becomes easier and easier and easier to tell the truth. And even myself today, every once in a while, I'll like throw a little embellish in there and I'll do the same thing. I'll go, you know what? I don't know why I said that. That's a lie.
That's not true. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think out of that experience? I mean, looking now at it, what do you think the biggest gift you got out of that?
Freedom.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
That's the biggest gift I got.
Freedom from the bondage of self. I was so locked up, was so tight that, just being able to, humility.
When you say humility, is it
being able to be okay with who I am?
right? So it was a part of giving up those 2 years.
Because that was all ego.
Yeah.
I needed to have more time than my now wife, Jackie, Steve S. There was people in my life that I had, Kim R. There was people in that I had more time than, and I needed to have more time than them because it was status, you know. And that was the biggest reason I think that I would never want to say anything because, you know, I got more time than them, and I always want to have more time than them. And my wife jabs me every once in a while now. She'll tell me, I'll always have more time than you, bud.
Yeah.
You know, let's just hope it's only a year and a half to whatever it is, you know,
Yeah.
a year and a half, not a lot longer than that.
She's not, degrading you or anything.
No.
Well, it's fun banter at that
It's
point,
it's,
right?
it's the same thing with the Magettis, right? And you know, and there's a what's crazy is there's a second part of this clean date story which I had no clue about, right? Honestly, we're in group, me and Braun and Jimmy and the men's group, and my last clean date that just passed on November 2nd, 2006, and I'm all, yeah, man, the last day I ever smoked weed was at the Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses show on November 1st, 2006. I don't know if I said the date, but I said who was in the show.
Yeah.
Typical Braun, dude.
Looked it up?
Analytical Braun.
Yeah.
Looks it up because he's like, man, that's a hell of a show right there. And he couldn't remember them playing together, right?
I was there at that show.
And it was Motley.
Shoreline?
Yes. It was Motley Crue and Aerosmith. That's who
Guns
it was.
N' Roses.
No.
Oh, then I wasn't at that
It was
show.
Motley Crue and Aerosmith. That's who I went and seen. So
Oh.
he looks it up. The show was on November 2nd. So,
Oh, got you on a technicality.
and I have no clue, dude, really. For the last 10 years or whatever, this 12 years,
You just picked a date?
I thought I went to the show on November 1st, 2006, right? So mind you, now we're at the Pit Speaker Jam in March. He's sharing. I go listen to him share. Me and my wife are sharing together on relationships, the good and the bad. We share. We go out to dinner, the three of us afterwards. And he starts to mumble something in the background. I mean, you know, Braun, he knows how to get to the point, right?
I have nothing to say.
Loving this story.
And so he starts to say something and then says, you know what, never mind. And we're all very close. I mean, him and Michelle are like that.
Yeah.
He took Michelle to her first meeting when she got out of, her recovery. He was her, like, kind of saving grace. And so they're very good friends. They're very tight, and they have a very, like, close and intimate relationship, which I'm completely cool with. I think it's awesome, right? And I'm like, no, you can't do that. I go, you can't say never mind. And you
Yeah.
started telling me something.
Finish it.
It's not like we're in a group of 10 people here.
Yeah.
You're in a close-knit group here, bro. I need to know what you're about to say. He goes, no. And then Michelle's all, yeah, spit it. And so he's like, well, about that, when you said Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith,
Motley Crue and Aerosmith.
yeah, he said,
Not Guns N'
I said
Roses.
Guns N' Roses and
Oh.
Aerosmith. I looked that up. There was no concert on November 1st. It was on November 2nd, but I was even hoping maybe they added 2 shows, so I looked it up for you, Ray. Go see your clean date's actually November 3rd, 2006. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Right? Are you fucking...
I got to do this again?
And all this is running through my mind. I just shared. I had a good share. Everybody came up to me and I was
Oh, my
talking
God.
about lying about my clean date in the share. And that's what kind of brought it up for him.
Okay.
And so he was he wanted me to know my actual clean date. He goes, I've been sitting on this for 6 months, Ray. He goes, do you want to know the
Yeah,
hard?
he's like that.
He goes, do you want to know the hard piece here? Was I actually called you on your fake clean date again? He goes, I didn't want to wait till November 3rd and be that guy. So I called you on November 2nd. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And I go, man, it's just weird, And I go, well, I guess I got to go talk to Steve about it, And then when I talked to Steve about it, Steve's like, you didn't know, bud. I mean, your clean date's November 3rd now. So when everybody calls you on the 2nd this year, you just tell them, call me tomorrow.
I mean, that's like a simple remedy, right?
Yeah.
You go, hey,
That's
I was
pretty
off by a
easy.
day.
Nobody's
Right?
going to even bat an eye.
No.
Nobody gives a
I
shit.
picked the end of the month of November because my clean date's in November too.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I couldn't remember when I actually. So I just was like November 27th because it's close enough to the end of the month where the odds are really high, and I just roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just was like, so like, how does, okay. So then now we're in group the other night, or we were eating for Braun's 23 years in Palo Alto last Saturday, not this Saturday,
Yeah.
Saturday before. We're having dinner because we always go and celebrate with the guys on their clean date. And Jimmy goes, it gets brought up.
Oh, gee.
Your
Yeah,
Your
my
clean
thing
date?
gets brought up.
On his clean date.
My banter
Yeah.
is always, it's always something about me
Ray.
and the clean date. and Braun gave me a 5-year chip, and it was a gold-plated 5-year chip, and then I gave it to one of my sponsees, but Braun asked me if I still had it because maybe he was going to give it to somebody else later or whatever, and I sent him a picture of another 5-year chip, and I said, yeah, I still got it. Well, I was lying. I didn't have it. I had given it away. Right. So just the whole chip thing and all this comes up. And now we're talking about, it was Pamela was there, Kirk's ex-wife.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
widow.
I know, Pam.
She was at dinner with us because Brian couldn't go. So that's kind of where all the banter was going around. And she's laughing at everything. And Jimmy says, man, Ray, dude, I have celebrated like 15 fake clean dates with you, bro. That is crazy.
Jimmy. And definitely, I could tell if it
Feeling
was
the love
Jimmy.
over there.
If it was Jimmy, it's not in an asshole way.
No,
No.
not at all. He's just like, and
doesn't
we're all
have that.
laughing.
Yeah,
you know?
it's got to
Yeah.
be.
And it's
yeah.
funny. And like I said, when I talked to Steve about it, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was like, it blew me back just because, and I knew it was an honest mistake, right? And that's okay. It was an honest mistake. Things happen.
Yeah. So, do you have like a story with Steve that was like one of your fondest memories with him? Like either doing things together or sponsee.
The best of, right?
Yeah.
Steve, yeah.
Or a couple
I mean, there's many, right?
going fishing with him.
I've gone
He loved to
fishing.
fish.
Yeah. He took me and my son out one time to New Maloney's.
Yeah, we went to New Maloney's fishing too.
Yeah, and we didn't get a single bite.
Nope.
Not a
Me
single
neither.
bite. Were you with us that time? Or
No, it's just him and I.
Yeah, and then I think
And
we
his
went
dog.
back. We went back like a week or two later, and he took my son out, and that was a nice one. I mean, that fishing trip that we went up to Tahoe.
Yeah.
Little did I realize in the heat of the moment when we're talking about that situation, but out on that lake, just chilling with him, him teaching me about trolling, and he just seeing him in his element.
Yeah.
Was pretty epic. I would say having him come to my wedding was probably another really big one, and him just telling me that he was proud of me and that he was happy for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole just getting to a place like I've talked about where I was able to feel like I could be loved again, and I could give love and receive love equally. Him and Vicky taught me how to do that. And because he wasn't, in the best way even during my, wedding, right? He could have easily used it as an excuse
Yeah.
to say, hey man, it's
No,
a
he's a
long
trooper,
trip.
dude.
I can't make it.
He's a trooper.
Whether it was the cancer or COVID or whatever, right? He could have used it as an excuse, and he showed up. But honestly, I want to say if it was probably, for me, I think the best moments I had were probably those last few times I sat by his bedside. And he taught me just once again, like, what it means to be humble. He was still helping me as he was transitioning. He was worried about me. We talked about sponsorship.
Yeah.
We talked about my next move. I told him my candidates, and he
Your
approved.
plan Bs?
Yeah.
Plan Bs?
I told him, I said, the things that you were one of them, and Fletch was the other one. And I said, these are the two people that come to my mind right now, and these are the only people I feel I could trust, I could let into my life, that know enough about me.
Yeah.
And I said, honestly, Steve, they're both comfortable choices, you know, and I feel like there may come a time where I want to get uncomfortable, but I'm not there right now.
Yeah.
You know, this is hard enough to watch, to lose you. And at that point, he knew.
What was it, like 6 months ago or something? Steve told both of us. I don't remember exactly when, but Steve told both of us, you guys need to start thinking about a plan B. And I hated that he said that to us. Like, what do you mean a plan B? He goes, you know, I'm not going to be around. And I started like just bawling. I was angry. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want a plan B. You
Right.
know,
You need to be in.
I'm like swearing and, just, this is not acceptable. And then that was the surrender, man. I was like, plan B. Okay. I like tortured myself for months at the very end before he passed about like, who's my plan B?
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Have you moved forward in that process?
Yeah. I have not found a new sponsor, but I've changed my perspective. Because I was driving myself crazy going down the list. And, like my co-sponsor, my wife, she's like, are you like thinking this thing or are you surrendering to your higher power's will? And that just like took everything away. All this stuff in my head, and I dropped in my heart, and like, oh, you know what? Now I remember how I got Steve as a sponsor. I was trying to control the situation. And when I let go, Steve appeared. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to let my higher power. And slowly but surely, like, I've came to the understanding that Steve's got somebody in mind for me. I just have to pay attention when that person shows up.
So who'd you pick?
Jimmy?
Which, honestly, I think that's perfect. I'm not saying that to discount anything that I would give you, but Jimmy's the guy that I would turn to, and I do turn to, like, even today.
I mean, there's
I just love it when he goes, brother.
some
Did that
people,
last night
I know.
at the meeting.
That's what I love about Jimmy.
there's some people you feel like you could hear 1,000 times and it would never get old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Steve was always one of those people for me. Majetti, or M, I guess I can say it.
Well,
Steve
He's
M
passed.
was always
Yeah.
one of those people for me. Roseanne is someone I can always listen to. And I feel like now I might have a little, but she's always got nuggets, so I could listen to her over and over
yeah,
and over.
that's true. She's
You know
very
what I mean?
wise.
And Jimmy is another person for me.
Yeah.
And Jackie F is, I can just listen to her share time and time and time again. And I would never be like, oh, I got something to do that night. I mean, if I have something to do,
Right.
and I won't go. But if
Yeah.
there's anything, if I can make it, I'm going to make it.
Yeah, I have those 3 or 4 people too. You always show up for, right?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just-
barring any unforeseen circumstances, it's like, okay, I'm there.
And
Love that.
True.
And there was some when I'm sitting, at Steve's side, like I said, when he's in that last few weeks of period of transitioning. I mean, he brought Jimmy up and he told me, man, you tell that guy, Ray, from me to him, that it meant the world to me, the message that he sent me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Jimmy that, man, and he started crying, because Steve wasn't Jimmy's sponsor; it was his,
Grand sponsor.
grand sponsor, and obviously didn't have the same relationship as you and I have with Steve, and haven't sat in that room and dropped the steps, but it's just a way, things happen around here that it's undeniable,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. The process for all of us is different, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate to say it, like losing Steve as a sponsor is like one of the hardest things. I still like listen to the podcast and cry. I just listen to it because I want to hear his voice.
Yeah.
You
I have
know?
his voicemail on from
Yeah.
when he called me on my last fake clean date. And I
That's the
listen to the
real one this
voicemail every
time.
once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I
you
said
get
just
it.
to hear his voice,
You get it.
you know?
Yeah. So it's nothing I'd ever want to go through again. But the perfect part about it is that we have this, right? We have that connection with Steve. Grateful is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that we had that. That came up our Tuesday night gratitude meeting. Is that
Clay Thompson said this the other day about leaving the Warriors and going to the Dallas Mavericks. That's the guy who played on the, I don't know if you know, guy who played on the Warriors, Clay Thompson, one of the big shooters with Steph Curry.
okay?
Probably one of the biggest names we've had in, you know, Warriors history. Right?
Did you say we had?
Yeah, I'm a
You-
Warriors fan.
Okay. We.
He said, "Don't be sad it's over. Just be happy it happened." You
Yeah.
know? And he could totally have a different perspective.
We're
They
talking
didn't-
about something different.
they didn't want him anymore. They wanted
Yeah.
to trade him, and he has nothing but great things to say about the time spent here, you know. And that's just the type of vantage point that Steve would give you, and he gave, I know, probably both of us all the way to the end, right?
Dude, you and I wouldn't be sitting here right now, here in this room, if it wasn't for Steve.
No.
Steve's
Not
the
at all.
one that told me, after all the toxic stuff that I was going through at work, you know, the family business, I was bringing that shit home with me and taking it out on the
remember that.
family. And he said, I want you to go home and ask Jen if you can leave your job. And when. And like I did, and she said, "Oh yeah, right now. I want you to leave right
The
right
second.
now."
Yeah.
Yeah. But if I hadn't, you know, if I didn't have Steve there,
And that was scary, I'm sure.
dude, I was terrified.
Yeah.
In fact, I had that conversation with Steve, like, "Oh, Steve, I mean, that's cool and all, but I can't just leave this job. This is the family business." It's like, I just want you to go ask Jen, you know, if you guys can manage it. Sure as shit, man. That was it. That changed my life.
And you found peace and serenity and happiness.
Once I left that environment,
Yeah.
Freedom.
everything was
Yeah.
different.
Freedom.
Yeah. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Steve. I'd still be there. I don't know, maybe. But I know that Steve's impact in those small decisions throughout yours and my time with him changed our lives.
Yeah, I look at my life now, and I mean, I grind. I grind right now. You know what I mean? Like I make a hour and 20-minute drive on the way in at 4:45 in the morning, right, to get there early because I've learned how to be that guy that's never late.
Yeah.
I run a crew of 20 up from 10 to 30 guys. All of that stuff is nonstop, you know. And Steve taught me how to do all that, and then I drive home 2.5 hours, you know, almost every day, right? And what Steve also taught me is that when you're making these sacrifices for your family right now,
Yeah.
right? For your daughter, you know, for your wife, for yourself. And when I pull up to that house that I own, like I have this sigh of relief and just like, man, you know, that house in there, it's filled with love and kindness and compassion, you know. And, you know, I'm doing for that little girl in there what she can't do for herself, you know. And this is the cost that it costs right now. Do I want to do it forever? No. And there's things that are gravitating me to like, hey, maybe we move to Tennessee when she goes to college. You know, maybe we go to South Carolina or Texas. I don't want to grind for another 10 years. And, you know,
I hear you.
that's Steve, you know, in my ear saying, you don't have to as long as you can,
Yeah.
you know.
work it
putting
out.
yourself in the position. to get
Something that his, like his direction got me to. This is a huge part of the lesson I learned at that point where I went home and asked Jen, is I thought I had to have the money. And he's like, you talk to Jen and you work it out. And so she's like, yeah, we'll work it out. We'll do whatever it takes to not live in that toxic environment with you. If that means, selling the house or whatever, that's what we're going to do. But we wouldn't have gotten there with Steve. I just wanted to wrap this up. Do you remember at the funeral service, the pamphlet that they handed out? There was something that was written, and I know Mark L., another sponsee, I'm pretty sure this was his that they wrote in this pamphlet. I just wanted to read it. It says, remembering Steve Majetti. Many of us had heard him, met him, knew him, and loved him. All of us listened to him. Over 40 years in recovery, his savage passion for selfless service and his unbridled drive to carry the message placed him high among the experienced elite in the world of clean and sober pioneers. It was his delivery, his style, his humor, and heart that were most impactful, unique. And that's what Steve did. He gave so that he could keep it, honor it, live it, and die keeping it alive.
Powerful.
That is powerful. And then there's something that I wrote, not even knowing about what Mark wrote. This is what's on the 4-Step website. In our lifetime, if we are fortunate, we will encounter special people that will change the direction of our lives for the better. For some, it might be something that they said that you will always remember, or an interaction that left you wanting to be a better person. With Steve in my life as a sponsor, I was able to change in a direction that not only bettered my life, but enriched everyone around me. Steve's impact on my life was the pebble in the pond, the ripple effect that reached out and touched the souls of everyone around. Steve passed away with 40 years clean. Get to know Steve a little by listening to his podcast episode. So, Ray, I really appreciate. We didn't talk much about 4-Step, but I think this was just something for you and I to honor him.
Steve left a legacy,
That's for sure.
and we get to honor that legacy. We are the legacy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I hear stuff that Steve said to me from sponsees and grand sponsees that share in this area up here.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it's been. I mean, I remember, I can't remember if we went to a meeting in San Francisco. I feel like it was me, you, and him, or it was sometime I went to a meeting up that way. And it must not have been with him because somebody was like, is Steve M your sponsor? I had shared the meeting, and I was like, yeah. And
You sound just like him.
and they're all, that's kind of what I thought. And I was all, I guess that's a good thing, Yeah. So
Yeah.
my job is to honor that legacy.
Very true.
That other comment that that other one that's in there about, what's it say about the journey and the travel people?
The part about Steve's legacy that I'll most remember is what I keep passing down to people that I sponsor is to keep it simple.
Yeah.
That was his thing, man. It's why complicate it? Did you find it?
Yeah. It's just this one, because when I think of him and Vicky B and Steve B, and the way that they traveled, it was very attractive to me.
Yeah.
When I was new, and I thought, man, I didn't really have a friend like that. I didn't have a couple like that. I didn't even have a wife like that. You know what I mean? And so when I saw that, and they would be in Italy or Hawaii.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I just always thought, man, that would be so cool to be older and have travel buddies, and, you know. And so he says this, it just blew my mind when we were at the funeral, and I looked down and it says, as with any journey, who you travel with can be more important than your destination. And, you know, that was the four of them, you know, and they just like went around places. And the crazy thing is I have that today.
Yeah.
You know, there's four of us, and we travel around, and it's safe and comfortable and fun. And
You know what?
loving.
Yeah, exactly. If you were an outsider and you heard that, you might take that as a metaphor, like in the program, the people you travel in the program or through your recovery has that same effect.
Yeah, same thing.
I think that's it.
I've been fortunate enough to experience the same thing because other people did it as well.
Yeah.
It's been
Now that you start hanging out at our house, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own room now. They gave me a toothbrush. I'm just going to leave it
She
here.
walks in and starts cooking.
Oh, yeah. Then people start asking me where stuff is.
I mean, is that not comfort? I mean, that's
Yeah.
awesome, right? Like, that's where I want to be in my life, you know. And I have struggled with trying to. Jimmy's told me many a times. He goes, "More is not always better, Ray." You know.
Yeah.
And I always needed to have more. Before it was drugs, and then it was, you know, approval, and then it was money. It's like, you know, it has not served me, you know. And now
Yeah.
I'm in a position, or I'm in an area in my life. I just went to dinner last night with two couples, right, for somebody's birthday and clean date. We kind of did it together, and it was like the perfect group I like to go out with. And I could do two less, but not two more. And
Yeah.
I'll go to a celebration with 12 couples, 15 couples, sure, but I'm just
Fortunate to have that.
I'm just
And
there.
what
to
a good example.
Show face, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What a good example Steve and Vicky set.
Yeah. And
All right.
It's cool.
Well, Jan, I appreciate you sitting in on this one.
I feel really honored to be a part of this. This is really beautiful to watch.
Yeah, unfortunately, Josh is out of town. I really wanted him to be here. He has a great way of connecting with people, but it is what it is. So, everyone, thank you very much, and we sure appreciate you guys listening to this episode. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you. It's my honor and privilege.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Often you will hear addicts referring to a specific 12-step program or rehab. These are personal stories. We do not represent any of the programs.